Merry Draftmas to all that celebrate, and we are inches, days, minutes, a couple thousand seconds away from the 2025 NFL Draft, and today we are going to kick things off with one of a two-part mock draft. The first one, this one, a predictive first round, what I think will happen tomorrow night, Thursday night, when round one kicks off of the 2025 NFL Draft. Then our part two will be a complete and final San Francisco 49ers 7-round mock draft, what I think will transpire over the course of the next weekend. I think it's going to be awesome for San Francisco, and this has been one of the most unpredictable draft seasons thus far. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave us that 5-star audio podcast review, and let's dive into our final first round 2025 NFL draft, mock draft of the NFL draft season right here on 49ers Access. As you can see behind me, I have the Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator up, ready to go, and I think it's pretty clear what's going to happen at pick number 1, and that pick belongs to the Tennessee Titans. Of course, it's kind of been a known thing for about 1, 2, 3 months now. I have never believed anybody else would go number 1, maybe outside of Travis Hunter, but this pick will be Cam Ward. You don't need my breakdown on him. It's a clear cut. It's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, the world's falling apart and pigs are flying. So Cam Ward's going number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. And pick number 2, I think, is also clear as day. It's what I would do. It's what I'm hoping the Browns do on Thursday night, and that is take Travis Hunter. I think the clear-cut number 1 prospect in this year's draft. Play offense, play defense. Fills 2 needs for them. They have Jerry Jeanty, but you can use some extra receiver help. You have some cornerbacks, but you really don't have that true number 1. Denzel Ward has a concussion problem, and you may see a couple more guys in that room walk away in the next year or so once their contracts are up. So get Travis Hunter and kind of revitalize the franchise again, which seems like an ever-going cycle of, wow, great pick. Wow, how are they a 4-win team again? So you're hoping that Travis Hunter can be a major game changer for you of the Cleveland Browns. And pick 3, I think, although it will be Abdul Carter from Penn State, the top edge rusher in this year's draft, there is a little part of me that says watch out for Mason Graham here, but I don't think it's likely. I think these 3 first picks are kind of locks. Day 1, easy. It's not going to be a pressure cooker. It'll just be how long do these 3 teams take to get to the podium, because my goodness, it'll be 35 minutes that goes by, and we're only at pick number 4 on Thursday night. So I think it's Abdul Carter, but again, there is a tricky, like maybe a Mason Graham where you have Burns and Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence and Mason Graham on the interior. Create yourself a bona fide top 5, at least potentially, defensive line. But in that case, you take Abdul Carter. In this case, you got to trade Kayvon Thibodeau maybe. You don't want to pay him, so it leaves some room to maneuver and maybe a day 2 trade in this year's draft. But Abdul Carter is the pick at number 3 for the New York Giants in the first round. And to many people, pick number 4 is where this 2025 NFL draft begins. I don't think that's the case, although I do think the Patriots wouldn't mind trading down with, say, the Raiders or the Jets. Overwhelmingly, I think this pick is pretty clear as well. I think the Patriots have zeroed in their focus on Will Campbell at left tackle. You can maybe discuss Armand Membou. Maybe you want to get Drake May, a top receiver, but they just signed Stephon Diggs to a not big contract, but a fairly large contract. They'll probably add a receiver on day 2. I think they kind of have to at this point, but new regime, a new head coach. Maybe you can make a case for Ashton Jeanty here. Mike Vrabel loves himself some Derrick Henry. Go get your Derrick Henry 2.0 and Ashton Jeanty, albeit I don't think Jeanty will be as good as Henry is. Henry's one of the greatest of all time, but Jeanty certainly has the prospects and potential to be up there one day. But I think they go Will Campbell here. Get your left tackle of the future. There is some arm length concerns, but overall, even if he fails at tackle, you have a star guard to help you at the left guard and right guard position. So go get Will Campbell at pick 4. And to me, this is where the NFL draft begins, because you have a new regime in Jacksonville at pick 5. And I think you can make the case, had this been Trent Baalke, it's Mason Graham or it's Walter Nolan. And at that point in time, you're like, well, this is a pretty clear-cut defensive tackle prospect they're going to pick here at pick 5. But now with the new regime in place, you have a brand new head coach over from Jacksonville. Are they going to want to go offense? They have Trevor Lawrence. They have Brian Thomas Jr. They haven't really got the running game going. Could they want to get their own Bucky Irving and kind of transplant a lot of what they did from Tampa Bay into Jacksonville? This is where the wild card, which Adam Schefter called the Jaguars on his podcast this week, the Jaguars are the wild card of, do they go McMillan? Do they go Mason Graham? Do they go Walter Nolan? Do they go Ashton Jeanty? And I think there is a case to be made that, maybe the Bears give them a call and you're not sure. Do they want to go Ashton Jeanty? I think there's a real chance that, Ben Johnson in Chicago gets aggressive, wants to get his running back. They already have 2 good receivers in Adunze and DJ Moore. They have Cole Kmet. They have a pretty stout offensive line, sending 3 free agents this offseason. He may say, I got to get that finishing touch to the offense. But I think the Jaguars are going to be going to shock the world here, if you will. And I think they're going to pick Ashton Jeanty. I think they want to give Trevor Lawrence a running game. I think Travis Etienne could be a trade option for them, or at least more of that kind of scat back, third down pass catcher that I think they could utilize more of. But again, he's a first-round pick in previous years under Urban Meyer, so his contract will be up soon. So maybe he gets traded throughout the offseason or during the training camp periods of the NFL offseason. So I think Ashton Jeanty goes 5 overall to the Jaguars, and I think you are looking at an NFL draft rooms that are kind of shocked of like, oh, the Raiders wanted him, the Bears wanted him, and I'm sure the Dallas Cowboys wouldn't mind making a trade up, because Jerry Jones even said they're working the phones trying to get a trade done. Whether it's up or back, who knows? But it seems like a lot of people want this year's top running back, but I think there's not going to be many trades on Thursday night. You may see some, 2 picks forward, 2 picks back, but I don't see many of these, 15th overall pick jumps inside the top 10 to get a splash. I don't see that happening. This year's draft only has about, 4 to 5 clear blue chippers, and they're kind of already off the board. Hunter's that, Carter's that, Campbell's that, Jeanty's that, and I can argue Cam Ward isn't even that. I think it was a scout or an executive that said, had Cam Ward come out last draft process, he'd been the 7th quarterback taken. So it really shows you how kind of the pickings are slim, if you will, in this year's draft. But at 6 overall, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, who I'm sure Pete Carroll is chewing bubble gum with a frenzy, eating piece after piece, because he's so frustrated knowing that Ashton Jeanty went 1 pick in front of him. Maybe the Patriots and Raiders swap again those 2 picks. Not a big move up, but a nice chunk to go up and get ahead of Jacksonville in case they want to get Jeanty. But the Raiders here at pick number 6 on the board. You can make the case for a lot of people here if you are the Las Vegas Raiders, but overwhelmingly, I think there's a clear-cut answer here, and it's Mason Graham. I think they went from 2023 and thought our defense is good, it's underrated. They go get Christian Wilkins, thinking, okay, we have Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, Tyree Wilson. We have a front we can work with here. And that has kind of fallen apart. And a lot of injuries last year. I think they'd be better off getting Mason Graham on the interior, improving their run defense, improving their pass rush. He's a shorter guy. There is some size concerns, but overwhelmingly a top prospect in blue chipper in this year's draft class. You can make a case that, let's say, Ashton Jeanty's here, and the Raiders don't value him as much as the consensus says they do, maybe the Bears and Raiders make a trade at that point in time. Probably wouldn't be that rich of a move up for Chicago, just 4 spots or 5 spots from 10 to 6. That said, I think if Jeanty's there, the Raiders take him, but I think Mason Graham makes the most sense. You can argue, though, again, if the Raiders happen to trade back, let's say to 10 or 12 or whatever it may be in this year's class, they may value a player like Jahdae Barron or a player like Will Johnson. They don't have a cornerback room, really. Nate Hobbs left for Green Bay this offseason, so they really need some help. Maybe you see your Raiders make a trade late in this year's draft for Jair Alexander, who knows, but I think Mason Graham's a pick here. I think it's clear, pretty clear-cut. Get your BPA off the board if you're Las Vegas, which puts the Jets on the clock at pick number 7. And I think that, again, we're kind of narrowing down going into day one, looking at this saying, hey, day one looks pretty clear-cut. The Raiders get their guy, Mason Graham. The first 6 picks go by, and we're all saying, yep, that makes sense. This makes sense. At pick 7, I think this is going to be one of the saw that coming a mile away. Armin Membu, Missouri, they got to get a tackle. They have Justin Fields. You can argue McMillan, but you have Garrett Wilson. You like some pieces you have there. You pick early enough on day 2, I believe, to maybe get you a Luther Burden or one of these top receivers, a Jaden Higgins. There is a lot the Jets can do. Maybe a trade back, who knows? But again, I don't think the trade back options are going to be aplenty on Thursday night. So go Armin Membu. He can play right tackle for you in year 1. Go to left tackle in year 2 maybe, and kind of be your Morgan Moses replacement for you on the offensive line. You got to protect the quarterback, and I think for a team that is having a new regime, a new head coach, a new GM, a meddling owner, I think they're trying to play this thing safe. They rid themselves of Aaron Rodgers. Devontae Adams is gone via free agency. So I think if you look at what Aaron Glenn and the Lions did in Detroit, it was trenches. And I think for a defense of a kind of minded team, they realize that you have Steve Wilks, you have Aaron Glenn. The hope is those guys can already use a pretty nice roster that Saleh and Ulbrich put in place to help kind of reshape it. So I think they go offense at pick number 7, leading us to the Carolina Panthers. And overwhelmingly, one of the kind of worst kept secrets, at least, unless it's a massive swerve a la Vince Russo WCW in 2000, Jalen Walker seems like the guy. You put him in Evero's defense, give him that linebacker edge rusher hybrid. Seen plenty of Niner fans like him. I'm not a big fan of him. I know that sounds kind of rude, but at pick number 11, I wouldn't take him. He was on my top 5 prospects to not take for San Francisco. I don't think he fits their scheme or system. However, the Panthers need some help on defense. They spent a lot of money there in the offseason. They don't really have an edge rushing group, that number 1 alpha guy, and I think Walker, who is right now stuck in positions or in between positions at linebacker and edge, can be the outside linebacker for an Evero defense that wants to run that 3-4. And I think could also drop in coverage at times to kind of give you more and fits their scheme more so than San Francisco's at pick number 11. So I think Jalen Walker is the pick here. I think if James Pierce or Mike Green didn't have the red flags, you'd be having more of that conversation. But Jalen Walker seems like the pick here at number 8 for the Carolina Panthers. And here's where things get tricky, because the Saints need everything. You can pitch me on Marion Hampton here. If Ashton Jeanty fell, you can certainly pitch me on that. You can pitch me on D-line, tackle, offensive line. You can pitch me literally on anything. I am someone that believes, and it's been a back and forth for me because you've heard rumors of offensive linemen are going, 3 of them are going inside the top 10, top 15. And I think that lends this to being Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas. However, I think the Saints and Kellen Moore realized, look, we saw what we did in Philadelphia last year, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. We've gotten lucky. The top wide receiver on the board, McMillan, has fallen from Arizona to pick 9. I think you take him. You like Rashid Shaheed if he's healthy. He can be your field stretcher. You like Chris Olave and can kind of complement what he does. But even Olave has serious concussion problems where if he gets concussed again, he's in that Tua Tagovailoa may need to retire conversation. So I'd go McMillan here, get your receiver for the next 4 to 5 seasons, and you hope that you're probably going to be bad enough to pair him with a quarterback in the near future. I think it makes the most sense. Get you a receiver, expand your offense, and even if you have Shaheed, you fill that role. If Olave can stay healthy, then you have a young rookie receiver walking in, in a couple of years, you have a young quarterback walking into a position where you say, wow, Olave, Shaheed, you have McMillan, and it's like, okay, we have ourselves an offense that can actually provide some weaponry for a young quarterback in the next few years or so. So I'd go receiver here for the Saints. I think it makes the most sense. I don't think the McMillan drop-off will be that drastic as the rumors are saying. I think you go McMillan here, and he goes 9 to New Orleans, leaving number 10 on the board, the Chicago Bears, who may be the biggest threat to the San Francisco 49ers on draft day because the edge rusher group is relatively thin. You have Mike Green here. You have James Pierce. Both have red flags of the differing degrees. You also have Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart. Even Walter Nolan is here for the Chicago Bears. But I think the Bears are going to do what the Saints used to do under Dennis Allen and go with Shamar Stewart. They like those big project athletic defensive linemen / edge rushers. You've seen it over and over and over again. They were making trades up for guys that you just said, what are you doing? I think it makes the most sense. You get Dennis Allen, in there as DC. You trust Ben Johnson to help carry the offensive load. If they don't make a trade up for Ashton Jeanty, I think they're in a good place to maybe go get a running back on day 2, replace DeAndre Swift, and feel okay with that. And whether it is Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins or DJ Giddens or somebody else along those lines, maybe it's Marion Hampton, although the Broncos feel like that's kind of the pick for them at pick 20. I think Shamar Stewart's the pick here, and I think it makes San Francisco's life a heck of a lot easier. And look, Shamar Stewart's probably going to need a few years to kind of get up to speed and hope he can become what the projections may say. And I think getting him in a defensive line group that has Montez Sweat opposite him on the other side will do a load of wonder. Not to say they're similar players, but you're hoping that Shamar Stewart can become a Montez Sweat-like player when he was picked from the Washington Commanders a couple years ago, where he's kind of turned himself into one of the top edge rushers in football in the last few years. So I think it's a good pick for them. I think it makes the most sense. And I think it really wouldn't shock me on night 1 if Shamar Stewart goes at pick number 10, which I think would be, to some a reach, in my opinion, a massive reach for them, but I would not be shocked because Dennis Allen has a type, and Shamar Stewart fits that type for the Chicago Bears. Now pick number 11, the San Francisco 49ers. And I think we got the biggest hint yesterday via John Lynch, and it even helps San Francisco in this case knowing that Mykel Williams is still on the board and Shamar Stewart is off the board. Right in front of you at number 10. Makes your life a heck of a lot easier. You can argue Walter Nolan. I would love that pick for San Francisco. I don't think people are trading up for Mike Green or maybe Tyler Warren if you want to get crazy with it, but I think the pick is, again, going to be considered a reach, but John Lynch said yesterday they value the ability to have a run-stuffing, hard edge-setting defensive end, and that, my friends, screams Mykel Williams. They value production that was there at Georgia. He's probably one of the best edge defenders when it comes to against the run in this year's class. He's awesome. There is some concerns as to will things click as a pass rusher at the NFL level, but I think that's why Saleh, that's why you have Kosaric, where if you want to unlock something, you at least have that baseline with Mykel Williams being that run defender on the edge compared to Shamar Stewart, where you like the power, but he's lost 15, 20 pounds. Is the power going to remain? And there was absolutely zero production and lack of finishing, where Mykel can be so strong, push tackles back, and almost force quarterbacks to Bosa's side on the opposite end. So you go Mykel Williams here at pick 11. Again, it may be a reach to some, but overall, you got to pick players you like. The consensus boards are very confusing because it really depends on scheme, fit, coaching, where in previous years it was like, nope, that guy's clearly better than that player, whoever it may be. Whereas this year it's like, well, you can kind of pick and choose. Everyone kind of has their niches or their small factors they like and their small traits they love. And I think San Francisco has kind of made up their mind on they want to get an edge rusher they know can be a day one player compared to Nolan, who I think can be a day one player for sure. But ultimately, this is a very deep defensive tackle class. So I think you're going to see teams kind of avoid the defensive tackle room early in this year's draft class, knowing that there are so many deeper pieces where on day 3 you can find valuable players that kind of give you some reps starting on day 1. And whether it's, in a group of 2 or 3, you're going to find guys that can contribute on day 1, on day 3 in this year's draft class. But that brings us to pick 12 with the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry World's on the clock. He has seen 2 edge rushers and Tyrone McMillan go 2 picks ahead of them. So I think they would want McMillan, but it seems like Jerry wants to make a splash. And I think this is a pretty clear, we want to go with the wide receiver, get him with CeeDee Lamb, get Dak a number 2 guy. You traded for Joe Milton, I believe. So there is kind of some depth behind you. I think they go Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden is a transfer. Didn't really do much before that, but now at Texas last year, he looked like a clear as day number 1 wide receiver. The separation was off the charts. You give them CeeDee Lamb, who can do the screen stuff, the underneath stuff, and you give them a bona fide separator that can help Dak Prescott. The Dallas Cowboys get a stud at pick 12. He's a bona fide first-round pick, and I wouldn't be shocked if in some cases and even in some drafts, he is the number 1 receiver off the board in this year's NFL draft on Thursday night. So we're going with Matthew Golden, which I think makes pick 13 and 14 pretty easy for us. I think pick 13, you heard that Kelvin Banks, 3 offensive linemen, could go inside the top 15, maybe top 10. You can argue Josh Simmons here, but I think that the medical red flags, although he's been passing more physicals recently, and I think he'd fit what the Dolphins want to do. They lost their left tackle, Tron Armstead. They run that Shanahan-style scheme. Josh Simmons can run that extremely well. I think he fits them, but I do wonder the injury history, does that ward them off? Hence why I think Kelvin Banks fits them even better. There's a case to make where they may use Patrick Paul as their left tackle this year, get Kelvin Banks in as a left guard, and if Patrick Paul fails, you just move Paul to right tackle, you move Banks to left tackle, and you figure things out elsewhere. So I'd go Kelvin Banks here. It feels like the NFL is much higher on him than most. And I think the Dolphins are praying that teams like the Saints and teams like San Francisco don't take him because they really want Kelvin Banks out of Texas on the offensive line. They have a need there, and they have to protect Tua Tagovailoa as if their life depends on it, because if he gets hurt again with an injury or concussion, it could be over. So you got to protect your quarterback, get Kelvin Banks Jr. And pick 14, again, a very easy pick, Tyler Warren. They got to get a tight end. They don't have a tight end worth a damn out there in Indianapolis. You got to help Anthony Richardson, give him that security blanket. You give Shane Steichen is kind of do-it-all tight end. You can use him very much like Dallas Goedert, but as a H-back, a fullback, even a wildcat quarterback, you can manufacture plays for him where you go, oh my God, he's unlocking something in the offense we haven't seen before. They have Michael Pittman, you pair him with him, and you had Jonathan Taylor. You finally have given Anthony Richardson and maybe even Daniel Jones a very winnable offense to work in. So go get Tyler Warren. They don't have to make a move up. They usually don't make moves up, so the best player falls to them at pick 14 on probably their board, which brings us to pick 15 for the Atlanta Falcons, and I think this is where you see the first red flag player get taken. That is Mike Green, 17 sacks at Marshall. Just a tremendous player. If he didn't have red flags, you'd be having teams like the Saints, the Bears, maybe even the Jaguars, the Raiders. You'd be having this conversation of the production meets the film in almost a perfect image. And Mike Green, I think, goes 15. Raheem Morris, I think, needs to find some edge rushing help. They got to get to the quarterback. The defense went missing for large portions of the NFL season last year, which didn't ruin their season, but the best way to help a young quarterback is give him the offensive line and give him a tight end. They have the offensive line. They have Kyle Pitts. Well, get him a defense too. I think you go Mike Green here. It's too rich to take a center. Center class really isn't that great anyway, so you go Mike Green, pair him with Matthew Judon and company out there in Atlanta, and get to the quarterback, get takeaways, force sacks, and get the ball into your young quarterback's hand more and more to get him more reps and more comfortable at the NFL level, leading us to pick 16 for the Arizona Cardinals. And I'm torn on this because the Cardinals need offensive line help, but they need a guard. And I don't think the guards are worth taking this early in this year's class. I don't think Tyler Booker, although he doesn't not fit, I think it's too rich for him at pick 16. I think you'd see him later or earlier on day 2, later on day 1. You can make a real argument for a player like Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant, but overwhelmingly, I think they want cornerback help, and I think they view Will Johnson as that. You can make a case Will Johnson is a top 10 player in this year's class, but the speed and the injuries he had dropped him down. I think they realized that what Jonathan Gannon did in Philadelphia with Darius Slay, and even what Philadelphia did last year without Jonathan Gannon, with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, they got to have those cornerbacks on the outside that, may not have the most speed and stuff, but I think they want to have that number one lockdown cornerback. If you can keep that play in front of him, he's a great player. You can use him in that press man scheme. So I think there is a lot to like from Gannon to Will Johnson. I think Will Johnson's fall ends here at pick 16 to the Cardinals, and pair him up with Jonathan Gannon, who I think can actually do wonders with him in the NFC West. And you have the Bengals. And the Bengals are, to me, one of the more, I don't want to say polarizing, but confusing, interesting teams, because are they going to trade Trey Hendrickson? Are they going to extend him? They have the offense in place, Burrow and Higgins and Jamar Chase, but do you really could argue Tyler Booker here, protect Joe Burrow? And I think we've gone a lot of ways of look, they've got to invest in protecting Burrow. In previous years, they have done that. And now it's kind of flipped, right? You get a new DC in the room. They fire Anarumo in the offseason because the defense was atrocious last year, where this team had to put up 45 points a game, it felt like, to even have a chance to win. So I think it's clear as day. I think it's a great pick for them, and I think they get the traitsiest defensive tackle in this year's draft class, and that is Walter Nolan at pick 17 for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think his fall stops here. I think he's a top 10 player in this year's draft. I think he's an awesome player. I would love San Francisco to draft him, maybe even over Michael Williams, but I think the Bengals get a great player who I think can fit in on day one and be not a game changer, but ultimately can develop into a top-tier defensive tackle at the NFL level. Then you have pick 18, the hated Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to give them the worst pick, the worst player in this year's draft. No, I won't do that out of the sake of trying to be correct and predictive here, but will Seattle do what they need to do? And there is a fear in me that the Seahawks are going to take Mike Green if he falls to them. You got a defensive-minded head coach. I think they realize that, look, we want to eat on defense, get to the quarterback, wreak some havoc. They see a lot of offensive lines are going lighter, and you're going to see a rather lighter offensive line draft class. I think they want some power, some feistiness on the defensive line. So I wouldn't be shocked to see this be Mike Green. I think it could be a steal for them, but I'm going to give them the pick they should make. And it's a pick I think everybody believes they'll make, or at least, they believe they won't make, but they should make. And that is Gray Zabel. He can play center. He can play guard. He can play tackle. We all saw what happened last year when Sam Darnold did not have an interior offensive line. It was just a mess. He was escaping pockets. He was running for his life. He was throwing interceptions. If you can get pressure on the interior against Sam Darnold, it is going to be the end of days for him. And so you got to get Gray Zabel. You can play guard, center, doesn't matter what you want. He can do it for you. He's a really good player, the most versatile offensive lineman in this year's class to me. Maybe outside of Marcus Bowe from Purdue, but Gray Zabel is a better player than him by far. So I think you go Gray Zabel. I'm hoping for the Seahawks case they do this, but again, still would not be shocked if they didn't. And for the Buccaneers at pick number 19, if Jihad Campbell, who apparently is falling down boards due to his shoulder injury at Bama, is there, you are going to see the Buccaneers run this pick to the podium like prime Usain Bolt. Pair him with Levante David, get your Devin White 2.0, who in his prime was a great player, but just fell apart quickly. They want to find that linebacker they need to have, and I think Jihad Campbell fits that. I think he's a pick here at pick 19. I think he makes the most sense for them in this year's draft class. I wouldn't be shocked to watch the Buccaneers maybe want to make a trade with the Cardinals, get ahead of the Bengals at pick 17 if Jihad Campbell is still on the board. But again, in this case, he's still there. Get Jihad Campbell. I think it's a great pick for them overall. Now the Denver Broncos are here on the board at pick 20, and I think this is a slam dunk. A lot of talk is, do 3 running backs go in the first round? I don't know, but I think 2 go for sure, and I think it's Ashton Jeanty and Marion Hampton. I think you get Hampton in Denver. Sean Payton loves running backs. He had Deuce McAllister, Reggie Bush, Pierre Thomas, and again, like they love running backs out there in New Orleans. Now with the Broncos, they really haven't gotten it together. You have Bo Nix, you have Cortland Sutton. You can argue you can go receiver here. Maybe you want to pitch the idea of Emeka Mbuka. Maybe you want to go with Jaden Higgins. Maybe you want to buy into Luther Burden III. I think they go with Marion Hampton here and they buy into the running back class. I think Sean Payton is quietly one of the better running back whisperers in football. We all applaud Kyle Shanahan. Sean Payton is one of those, Alvin Kamara and company as well. So I think they go with the Marion Hampton at 20, pair Bo Nix with Hampton. They have Cortland Sutton, and it does wonders for them out there in the AFC West. There's the Raiders. There's the Chiefs and the Chargers. You got to find more firepower against those teams. Marion Hampton fits that for them at pick 20. And now we have maybe the first position I start to consider Shedeur Sanders. And I'm someone that does not buy Sanders as a first-round pick. I don't think he's a first-round pick quarterback. I think Shedeur Sanders is a fine player. There's athletic traits, but he isn't this uber athlete. He doesn't have this big arm. Funny enough, there's some people comparing him to Brock Purdy. I don't think that's a one-for-one, obviously, but I think there is a lot of similarities in their game. He likes to play over the middle, and I think with the receivers the Steelers have in place, that doesn't really fit what he wants to do. You have DK Metcalf, you have George Pickens, who may or may not get traded in this year's draft period, but I think they figured things out with Aaron Rodgers enough. They bring him in for 1 year. I think he band-aids them to hopefully get to a better quarterback class next year and hopefully can have them win some games in the near future, that being 2025. So I'm not going to take Shedeur Sanders. I think this is a spot where the Giants or the Browns are like breathing heavy. Okay, what happens here at 21? But I have the Pittsburgh Steelers actually drafting kind of a reach as I mess up my mock draft board here on the screen. I have them reaching pretty heavily, and I don't love this pick overwhelmingly, but I do think there is some credence to it. It says they have to have a quarterback. If that's Aaron Rodgers, X that out. I think this running back class is really deep. I don't think they'd go there. You can maybe pitch me on the idea of a player like a Nick Scorton, get an edge rusher, but you have TJ Watt, you have Hightower, you have a lot of good picks you like. I'm going to have a massive reach here. I don't love this pick. I think it's one that I would not make myself, but I do think it's a pick that I think NFL teams are much higher on him than PFF or most mock draft simulators and pundits are. I'm going to pick safety out of South Carolina, Nick Eamon-Warry. They like those uber athletic safeties. They reached on one with Edmonds a couple years ago. I think they value the position enough to make that reach. Again, I wouldn't do it, but I think with the needs they have, you can get running back in round 2, on day 2, maybe even early on day 3, I think. If you get Rodgers in the building, it kind of alleviates that. And you have a player like Deshaun Elliott, who you're not tied to by any means. You have Minka Fitzpatrick there. Get Nick Eamon-Warry. I think it does wonders for them. However, again, I'd rather have this player on day 2. But overwhelmingly, I think you are going to see some teams reach for some players based on positional value. You're going to see tackles go early. You're going to see maybe a guard or two go early because teams want to make sure they get the top tier guy, knowing that, let's say, in that grouping of 3 to 10 is kind of all, it can kind of all be jumbled up, and you can kind of pick who you want out of that grouping. So I think it's a reach. I wouldn't do this, but again, Pittsburgh will take risks. They took Kenny Pickett, small hands, a couple years ago. That was a bad move. At safety, they loved Edmonds a couple years ago, which didn't really work out for them, but I think overwhelmingly, yeah, Fitzpatrick, you have some room to take a risk here. And if it pays off, then bang, you get a heck of a player out of Eamon-Warry in the first round. Now at pick 22, I think you get into the conversation of, do you go Colston Loveland? Do you start having the conversation of Kenneth Grant? I think there's a real conversation to be had that either one of the Michigan guys are going to be off the board by pick 22 to the Chargers, simply because, there's needs at both those positions for the Chargers, and I think Harbaugh wants to get his boys in the building. Didn't take him last year, but I think he wants his boys. I think he will go either Kenneth Grant or Colston Loveland. I'm going to shock you a little bit, and I think they're going to go Kenneth Grant here because when you lose Poona Ford, you want to have that space heater on the interior. I think they need it more than anything. You lose Joey Bosa, you lose Poona Ford, you have Khalil Mack, but you got to fix your defensive line. I think you're getting one of the better defensive tackles in this year's class, albeit I think he's my 4th behind Graham, Nolan, and Harmon. But I think Michigan guy, defensive fit out there in LA with the Chargers. Harbaugh gets his boy, giving us and bringing us to pick number 23 of the draft, that being the Green Bay Packers. And is this the year the Green Bay Packers, in their own town where the draft is held this year, finally go wide receiver? Adam Schefter said he thinks this may be the year. And I'm here to say, as working as Brian Gutekunst in this position, no, it's not going to happen. Green Bay would be smart, in my opinion, to take Jaden Higgins here at pick 23 or Luther Burden. I think there's a real need at wide receiver. You're not going to get Christian Watson back for maybe the entire season, knowing he tore his ACL. You like Jaden Reed a lot, but there's real injury history there at the wide receiver position for them. They like those bigger body guys. Higgins fits that for them. He can be the boundary player, and I think overall replace Christian Watson in a few years or so once his contract is done. But knowing Brian Gutekunst, knowing he tends to never do what he's supposed to do as the Green Bay Packers GM, I think you're in a place where they are going to pick Nick Scorton, Texas A&M edge rusher. He likes those bigger body guys. Shamar Stewart's already gone, who I think fits what they want to do defensively on the edge. I think Nick Scorton is a better player than Shamar Stewart, more production there for sure, this less of a ceiling to reach. I think they go edge rusher. You want to pair somebody with Rashawn Gary on the defensive line. You can maybe argue going Trey Amos, cornerback from Mississippi or Ole Miss, because is Jair Alexander going to be there? I don't know. But I think Nick Scorton is the guy. We've seen time and time again teams go defensive line when they have a need there, obviously. But even when teams have needs at cornerback, a lot of the fixes are get a better pass rush. I think Nick Scorton does that. And he also fits what the Packers want to do from a archetypal standpoint, from a defensive line and edge rushing group. So going Nick Gordon at pick 23. And at pick 24, here's where I think we are going to have our first trade. And this is where I think things get a little fun, because I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to trade back from pick 24, and they're going to talk to the Cleveland Browns, and they're going to get pick 33, and they're going to get pick 94 in this year's class, and maybe something else like pick 216. We're getting into the weeds there. You can argue that for sure. I'm going to do this trade again. It may not be perfect, but I think this trade will happen in some way on draft night. The Vikings only have 4 draft picks this year. They can pick up 2 more by trading back with the Browns. The Browns getting ahead of the Giants on draft day, and they're going to pair Travis Hunter with Shedeur Sanders. And the reason why I'm sticking to this, and I believe in this, is because they somehow convinced Myles Garrett to come back. After he asked for a trade, he seemed pretty adamant, I want out of Cleveland. What's the thing he said when he came back and got that deal? He said, they pitched me on a plan, and I loved it. And everyone said, what's the plan? Well, doing my best investigative journalism, I think the plan is get Travis Hunter and get Shedeur Sanders in the same building, revitalize that franchise, give people something to talk about in Cleveland, that it's not Deshaun Watson and all the allegations he has against his name, and hopefully reshape the Andrew Berry regime and their time in Cleveland to a better standpoint than what it is now. But I want to pause here for a second, because if you're a Browns fan and you want to see Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders play out there in Cleveland this year, or you want to see one of your top draft picks play live in person, go to a concert this summer or spring, or even see the MLB or NBA playoffs live and in person, go to SeatGeek.com and use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. It's the best ticketing app in the market. It's the one I use every single time I want to go to a game or an event. Again, promo code 49ersaccess at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Back to the mock draft at pick 25. And if you are the Houston Texans, you are praising whatever God you serve, because Josh Simmons is still on the board. You traded away Laramie Tunsil. Sure, you can get into the weeds and say, give me a receiver next to Nico Collins. Stephon Diggs is gone. You didn't get Deebo Samuel this offseason, and Tank Dell's injured. You can maybe argue Emeka Mbuka. I would not complain there, but I think Josh Simmons becomes your instant left tackle upgrade. You lose Laramie Tunsil via trade to the Commanders, creates a massive hole for you. That offensive line already sucked last year. I know there's risk of injury, but if he's healthy, you are getting yourself this draft class's best offensive tackle. He fits your offensive scheme. Maybe if you want to avoid the injury stuff, you go Josh Connolly Jr. I can certainly see that too, but I'm going Josh Simmons. The fall stops here at pick 25. Then you get into a rather interesting position for the Rams. I think the Rams are eyeing Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart in this year's class. I think they want a quarterback. They want to avoid the Matthew Stafford fall-off when he retires. They want to have that seamless transition into the next era of Rams football. However, you didn't get that here. I think there's a case to be made. You could go Jahdae Barron, cornerback from Texas, but I have a sneaky feeling that they want to expand the offense, maximize Stafford in his last year. They paid for some defense this offseason. They moved a lot of offensive linemen around. I think they view Colston Loveland as the pick at pick 26. You were force-feeding Tyler Higbee late in the year when he came back. You had Puka Nacua. You lost Cooper Kupp. You brought in Devontae Adams. Why not go get Colson Loveland tight end and give you another top-tier receiving threat and make the San Francisco 49ers, the Cardinals, and the Seahawks say, well, Greenlaw's out of the building. The Cardinals didn't get Jahad Campbell. In Seattle sitting there like, oh, we don't know who our linebackers are. Colson Loveland is a mismatch in the NFC West, and I think could help propel the Rams to a better level come playoff time, barring health from their quarterback. And it also, if you draft him now, could give your next quarterback a very, very, very solid safety net when it's all said and done. So I'm going Colson Loveland here, tight end out of Michigan. It makes the Rams offense even more dangerous.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Now the pick at 27. You could go Tyler Booker from Alabama. I think it's a pretty good pick for them. I know he's kind of the fringe first-round pick. I think he fits what they want to do overwhelmingly on offense. They have a need at guard, but I think you see Malachi Starks fall to pick 27. I think he goes here. You can argue the Vikings if they don't make that trade with the Browns, but I think Malachi Starks goes to pick 27. The Ravens loved to use 3 safety sets. They weren't healthy enough last year to do so, but if they want to use 3 safety sets, they run those safety sets more than anybody else in football. They almost had 3 safeties hit 1,000 snaps just 2 years ago. Again, health kind of limited them last year, but that is their base defense. A 3 safety defense is their base defense. Get Malachi Starks in the room. You can do that more often than not out there in Baltimore. And now we're at pick 28 with the Detroit Lions, and I don't really see a need at wide receiver. You can probably get one of those on day 2, I think, for Detroit. I think their needs are on the edge. You can certainly pitch me on Donovan Ezeracco. If you want to go receiver, Emeka Mbuka, although I don't see it being that big of a need here. You can certainly pitch me on the idea of reaching for a player like Carson Scherzinger from UCLA, and being that kind of roaming, off-zone linebacker for you. But I think they're going to zig where a lot of people zag, and they're seeing Derek Harmon fall from what seemingly was going to be pick 11 to San Francisco or pick, in the teens all the way to 28. Derek Harmon, I think, is from Detroit, Michigan. He comes back home, fills a big need for them. Ali McNeil may be hurt for a long time, so you get Derek Harmon in the building. I think he fits well next to Aiden Hutchinson off the injury. I'm going Derek Harmon here. I think his fall, there were some medical problems, but I think his fall stops here. I think it's a good spot for him. Good spot for Detroit. I think it's a good marriage for them as a whole. And now the Washington Commanders at pick 29. The Commanders filled a lot of needs this offseason, right? Brought back a lot of their players. They acquired Deebo Samuel. They acquired Laramie Tunsil. I think when you have wide receiver and left tackle kind of checked off on your needs, you can certainly pitch me on Jahdae Barron here from Texas. I could easily see that being the pick. Or you can pitch me on James Pierce Jr. And this is where I think things get a little confusing, because if you're the Washington Commanders, do you want to take a risk on James Pierce Jr., with the red flags he has, the arrest he had on weapons charges, the does he love football conversation, or do you want to bank on Jahdae Barron as a slot cornerback for you? They have Mike Sanders still. You can give you some flexibility. I think this is where we kind of get shocked. And I think James Pierce Jr. actually falls almost nearly out of the first round, and the Commanders go Jahdae Barron. At pick 29, again, I may go James Pierce Jr. here if it was me, but I think they're going to go Jahdae Barron at pick 29. You can argue James Pierce Jr. for sure, and I would not doubt that whatsoever. If he was not a red flag, you're talking about probably a top 15 pick guaranteed, but I think there are some concerns out there. I think James Pierce Jr. fits that defense tremendously well in Washington, but now that you're here in your Buffalo and you have Joey Bosa, you have some guys you like. I think Von Miller is still there. I think this is a clear-cut go get James Pierce Jr. if you are them. Get yourself a top pick in this year's draft. Get him out of the area of Tennessee, out of the South, get him up in the Northeast and on the East Coast. Get him into an entirely different place. Give him Von Miller and Joey Bosa as two guys to learn from. I think it makes some sense for them. Now you have the Kansas City Chiefs, the penultimate pick in the first round for KC. I think it's a pretty clear and honest pick if you are the Chiefs. You got to have a tackle. You brought in Jalen Moore. You're going to take Josh Conerly here. Jalen Moore may or may not fail. I think he deserves to get a chance to start, but I think Conerly fits what you want to do, and you're not paying Jalen Moore too much money to him not be a swing tackle. And even if Conerly wants to sit for a year, I wouldn't blame you there. Sit for a year and take over either late in this season or next season for you. If you're KC, you want to get younger on the offensive line. You're paying a lot of people. I can see them wanting to draft the tackle here, and I kind of think they need one. So I'm going Josh Conerly here, and I think we are nearing the end of the last pick in the 2025 NFL Draft when it comes to the first round. I think this is where you finally see Tyler Booker come off the board. He'll take over for Mekhi Becton on the offensive line. They just re-signed Cam Jurgens, their center. They get Tyler Booker at pick 32, and the rich get richer with the Georgia and Bama products out of Philadelphia. The Super Bowl champions find themselves with a dominant front on the defense and the offense as things progress. I think it's a great pick for them. They get probably, depending on how you view Will Campbell on the offensive line, this year's best guard in the power scheme for you. Power gap scheme out there in Philadelphia, and free up space for Saquon Barkley to help fuel their offense. So, as I read you the picks, number 1, Titans, Cam Ward. Number 2, Browns get Travis Hunter. Number 3, the Giants go Abdul Carter. 4, Patriots, Will Campbell. 5, the Jaguars take Ashton Jeanty. 6, the Michigan defensive lineman Mason Graham goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. 7, the Jets go Armin Membu. 8, Panthers go Jalen Walker. Saints go Tedero McMillan at pick 9. And pick 10 through 15, Bears, Shamar Stewart. Niners, Micah Williams. Cowboys, wide receiver Matthew Golden. Out of Texas, the Dolphins go Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive lineman out of Texas. Tyler Warren stops his fall at pick 14 to the Colts. Pick 15, Mike Green, edge rusher from Marshall, goes to the Falcons. Michigan, the second Michigan player off the board. Going to have 4 of those in the first round in this year's class. Will Johnson goes to the Cardinals. Pick 17, Walter Nolan, who may be the trade-seest defensive tackle in this year's class, goes to the Bengals. Gray Zabel, a pick I think the Seahawks aren't going to make, but they should make, goes to Seattle at pick 18. Jahad Campbell, a home run pick for the Buccaneers at pick 19. Marion Hampton goes to the Broncos at pick 20. A very big reach, but could be worth it when it's all said and done. I think the NFL is a lot higher on Nick Emanwari, safety out of South Carolina, at pick 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Harbaugh gets his boy Kenneth Grant on the defensive line from Michigan at pick 22 to the Chargers. The Packers buck the wide receiver trend of all the consensus pick and say, no, we're sticking to our guns. They go Nick Gordon, Texas A&M edge rusher at pick 23. At pick 24, we have our first and only trade in the first round. The Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes end here with the Browns trading up with the Vikings at pick 24, meaning Minnesota does not make a pick in this year's first round. Pick 25 goes Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, to replace Laramie Tunsil of the Houston Texans. Pick 26, a Michigan player. The final one goes at pick 26 to the Los Angeles Rams, Colston Loveland, tight end. to help Matthew Stafford and co out there in LA. 27, Malachi Starks. The Ravens get back to their 3 safety sets. 28, the Lions go Derek Harmon. They feed the defensive line. They lose Aaron Glenn. They want to fix their defense again, get back to just annihilating opposing offenses. Derek Harmon can do that for you on the defensive line. Pick 29 and pick 30, Jahdae Barron, James Pierce Jr. You can easily put James Pierce Jr. at pick 29. Some red flags dropping, but too good enough for the Bills to let him pass by them. Jahdae Barron goes to the Commanders. James Pierce Jr. goes to the Buffalo Bills. Josh Connerly, he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs at pick 31. Helps Mahomes and protects him after they got just destroyed and annihilated by the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And speaking of the Philadelphia Eagles, off their Super Bowl victory against the Kansas City Chiefs, they replaced Mekhi Becton with Tyler Booker out of Alabama and open up hopefully more space for Saquon Barkley. You can tell me what you think of the mock draft in the comments below. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully your team got the player you wanted. Tell me who you like. Tell me what picks you don't like. Do you like the board as a whole? And while you're doing so, hopefully you're sipping on some goat fuel that you can purchase with my affiliate link in the comments and save yourself 10% off your purchase. Again, get yourself a can of goat fuel and watch this year's 2025 NFL Draft on Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday morning throughout almost the entirety of the day. And if you want a place to get live reactions and coverage of this year's first round, go to 95.7 The Game. I will be on the air on the YouTube channel and on the radio using the Odyssey app if you're outside of the San Francisco Bay Area. You need to go to 95.7 The Game. I'll be giving my takes, my reactions to each and every pick of this year's 2025 NFL first round, and maybe even round 2 and 3 on Friday if we're lucky on Friday night. So if you want a place to watch this year's draft and react to it live, go to 95.7 The Game. Like and subscribe there. Also like and subscribe here. Leave your comments down below. Don't forget to follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X for Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. And you can also be sure to get yourself a can of goat fuel and use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. And with that said, we are entering in to the 2025 NFL Draft tomorrow night, Thursday. I cannot wait for it to happen. But until then, my name is Sterling Bennett. Stay tuned for our final 49ers 7-round mock draft. And as always, stay faithful.